Hi, I'm Laureen. At my sister's engagement party, they seated me in the hallway, right next to the restrooms. No explanation, no mistake, just silence, like I didn't matter. Then came the photos without me, the speech I wasn't allowed to give, the jokes at my expense, all while smiling guests clinked champagne glasses like nothing was wrong. But what they didn't expect was that I'd stop staying quiet. What happened next? It didn't just shake the room, it tore the mask off an entire family lie. I pulled into the resort's lower lot, the one they usually kept for staff or overflow guests. My GPS had chirped, "You've arrived," but I didn't feel like I'd arrived anywhere that welcomed me. The sky over Santa Barbara was clear, that kind of sharp California blue that made every shadow starker. There were no parking attendants in sight, just white tents fluttering in the distance and a long gravel walk ahead. I checked my lipstick in the mirror, reapplied a dab of concealer to my tired eyes, then slipped on my heels. The navy dress I'd carefully chosen felt suddenly too understated, too deliberate. At the front gate, a young woman in a headset glanced up. "Hi, welcome. Are you with the bridal party or guest side?" "Laureen Carter, I'm Trista's sister," I said, offering a smile that didn't quite stick. Her fingers paused on her tablet. I saw it, the flicker of hesitation, then the quick professional smile reassembled. "Oh yes, you're seated at table H." "Where is that?" "Right through the hallway, just past the coat room." My lips parted, but the protest died there. I followed her finger toward the side wing. Behind me, a pair of older guests were ushered inside the grand ballroom, laughter trailing behind them. I peeked at the seating chart. Trista's friends, her fiancé's colleagues, extended cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all lit under chandeliers and cascading orchids. My name was nowhere on that board. I clutched my invite card, the one with calligraphy so pristine it felt ironic now. "Laureen Carter, honored guest," it had said. Honored, right next to the mop closet. As I stepped toward my designated table, the hallway grew colder, not physically, just emotionally sterile. Someone had placed an air freshener near the restroom door. That told me everything. I set my purse down at table H, which had 3 chairs and no centerpiece. It felt less like a reception and more like a punishment. 2 days earlier, I'd received an email from Trista's assistant because she couldn't bother to send it herself. "Please avoid wearing red, white, black, or bright yellow. The bride would prefer soft neutrals or navy tones. We trust you understand." I understood, loud and clear. The message wasn't about elegance, it was about not standing out, about making sure I faded quietly into her backdrop. So, I wore navy, not because I was trying to make peace, but because I wanted to prove I could play by her rules, even when they were rigged. I watched the guests filing past. No one looked my way. A waiter came by and offered me water, not champagne, not wine, just water. Like I was there to monitor coat check, not celebrate my sister's engagement. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Everything about me blended. Dark hair tied back, understated heels, even my smile. It didn't make a ripple. Maybe that was the point. Somewhere, a bell chimed. Probably a signal for the cocktail hour. I didn't move. For years I'd swallowed the jabs, the silence, the constant reminder that I was the quiet sister, the one who didn't demand attention, the one who didn't need a spotlight because she brought her own books to family events. But this was new, banished to the hallway like a last-minute RSVP. I pressed my hands flat on my thighs, steadying myself. I didn't want to cause a scene. I wasn't here to ruin anything. I came because, despite everything, part of me still thought, maybe things could change. Maybe someone would turn to me and say, "I'm glad you're here." Instead, I sat by the door, invisible, silent, and as voices from the main hall grew louder, champagne corks, laughter, applause, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud until now. I hadn't come to start drama. I came to be part of something. But sitting next to the utility closet, I finally understood. Maybe I was never meant to belong. I stayed in that chair longer than I cared to admit, watching the hall fill with people who didn't seem to notice I was missing from the room, or from anything, really. Laughter spilled down the corridor in bursts. Glasses clinked. Someone in stilettos walked past me and didn't even glance down. After what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 30 minutes, I stood up. I needed to move. Sitting there made me feel like I was sinking into the carpet. I wandered slowly, staying along the outer edges of the reception area. I didn't want to draw attention. Or worse, pity. I kept my face neutral, the kind of polite blankness I'd mastered during years of family gatherings. To the right of the bar was a tall display labeled, "Our Family Through the Years." White letters in looping cursive sat atop a 3-panel board, decorated with fake eucalyptus leaves and tiny fairy lights. A sign beneath it read, "Photos curated by the bride herself." That made me hesitate. Still, I walked over, telling myself not to expect anything. But I did. Of course I did. Each photo was printed on glossy cardstock and framed with gold tape. Trista at 4 years old with cake smeared across her cheeks. Trista at her high school prom. Trista at college graduation. Arms thrown around friends. Family vacations. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. Some images I remembered vividly, because I was there, but I wasn't in any of them. Not once. Not a blurred shoulder. Not a side profile. Not even the back of my head. I stared longer than I should have, hoping maybe I'd missed one. Maybe a small group photo tucked near the corner, one where I hadn't been cropped out, but no, my name wasn't there. My face wasn't there. It was like I'd never existed in her story. I didn't hear Marjorie approach until she spoke behind me. "She worked hard on that board," she said, like it excused the erasure. I turned to her. "You didn't notice I wasn't in a single photo?" She took a sip of her mimosa, her expression unreadable. "You never liked being photographed, Laureen. You always said so." I blinked. That was in middle school. And even then it wasn't true. I just didn't like the way Trista pushed in front of me. Marjorie waved a hand lightly. "You always kept to yourself. I thought you liked it that way." That was the moment it clicked. It wasn't just that they forgot me. They had rewritten me. She turned to go, her heels clicking gently on the hardwood floor. "Don't dwell on this. It's her day." I looked back at the board. There was a photo from our family trip to Big Sur. Trista standing in front of the cliffs with our parents. I'd taken that photo. I remembered the breeze, the salt in the air, the way my dad couldn't figure out how to unlock the camera app. I was standing 5 feet from them. I wasn't behind the camera. I was beside them. And still, she'd edited me out. I walked slowly toward the guestbook table, needing a second to breathe. That's when I saw the decorative family tree. A thick wooden cutout where names were etched on gold leaves, glued in a sprawling pattern. Marjorie and Randall. Trista. Trista's fiancé. A few cousins. Even a second cousin named Austin I hadn't seen in 10 years. No Laureen. I leaned in, searching. Maybe my name was tucked beneath a leaf. Maybe I'd slipped into the glue wrong. But no, there was nothing. The staff had handed me a place card, yes. A seat in the hallway next to the restrooms. But here, on this carefully curated version of our family, I was invisible. No name, no photo, no place. Just a living ghost with a navy dress and a polite smile. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh, that's such a sweet idea," pointing to the tree. I stepped aside, letting them take it in. I didn't want to explain who I was. I didn't want to explain anything. I had never been one for confrontation. But erasure is something else entirely. It tells you not that you're disliked, but that you were never meant to be part of the picture to begin with. And suddenly, it wasn't about seating anymore. It wasn't about color palettes or champagne. They hadn't just given me a bad seat. They'd made it official. I wasn't in the family. Not in pictures, not on paper, not even in the story. I left the display quietly, blending into the swell of people moving toward the ballroom entrance. My dress brushed the wall as I passed, and I focused on breathing, slow, steady, like I could anchor myself to the rhythm. The main hall had shifted from soft sunlight to twilight glamour. The chandeliers overhead now shimmered gold. Waiters moved swiftly between guests offering champagne, crab cakes, and skewers that looked too delicate to eat. The string quartet played something upbeat now, almost joyful. It didn't match how I felt. I kept near the wall, nodding when people brushed past me. A few said hello in passing. more out of politeness than recognition. I was background. Then came the call. "Let's get everyone in for the big family photo." The photographer's voice boomed from near the center of the room, cheerful and commanding. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. I didn't plan to join. I figured no one expected me to. But someone, an aunt maybe, tugged lightly at my elbow. "Come on, sweetheart, you should be in this one." I followed, unsure why I did. We were arranged in clusters, people shuffled around like puzzle pieces. The photographer adjusted angles, scooted people closer together. My mother was already in the front row beside Trista, holding her champagne like a prop. I hovered at the edge, waiting to see where I should go. Trista's voice rang out. "Hope Laureen doesn't mind standing way in the back. She always preferred watching from the shadows anyway." A laugh scattered through the group, light, social, almost hesitant, but it landed. I didn't flinch. I smiled. That smile. The one I'd perfected at age 13 when she made fun of my braces in front of her friends. The flash went off. Everyone blinked. The photo was captured. A moment frozen in time. Another one where I was in the room but not really there. As people dispersed, a few guests offered me smiles, soft ones that tried to apologize without words. But no one said anything. Of course they didn't. I turned to head toward the open bar, just to grab something fizzy to hold, but was intercepted by a cousin I barely knew. "You're Laureen, right?" she asked. "You look different than I expected. Trista said you were kind of, I don't know, more artsy?" I forced a nod. "I write." "Oh, right, she mentioned that. Said you're kind of the mysterious one, lives with a cat and a lot of books." Before I could respond, Trista appeared beside her, smiling too brightly. "She's our very own little enigma," she said sweetly. "Single, introverted, very independent, like a Jane Austen character if Jane had an Instagram." More laughter. Even the cousin smiled, not cruelly, just in that awkward social way people do when they're unsure whether it's okay to laugh or not. But they always do. I didn't laugh. I just held my glass a little tighter. I didn't say anything, not because I lacked a comeback, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. You can't argue with a mask, and Trista wore hers flawlessly. To anyone else, she was warm, witty, welcoming. But to me, she was a lighthouse made of mirrors, designed to reflect light and never absorb it. I excused myself and slipped through the side corridor, past a row of manicured floral arrangements and into the nearest restroom, the kind with soft lighting and individually rolled towels. I stood at the sink and stared into the mirror. Hair neat, makeup subtle, dress appropriate, expression gone. I didn't look sad. I didn't look angry. I looked like I wasn't even in the room. The door creaked. Someone entered. I didn't turn. Let them think I needed time to touch up my makeup. In reality, I just needed to exist somewhere that didn't try to reduce me to a prop for someone else's spotlight. I dabbed my lips with tissue, flushed it down the toilet just to make noise, then looked at myself again. "They don't need me here," I whispered. "They need someone to compare her to." A shadow, a contrast. And the thing about shadows is, they move when the light does. The funny thing about being the family shadow, eventually, shadows move too. By the time I left the restroom, the light outside the tall ballroom windows had dipped into that warm golden hour glow, casting soft amber across the white table linens and sequined dresses. The room was fuller now, buzzing with that strange cocktail of excitement and polished pretense. I slipped back to the edge of the crowd, letting the ambient music and idle chatter act as cover. Somewhere near the head table, I spotted my dad laughing, gently, awkwardly, at something a man in a bow tie said. My mother was already seated beside Trista, her posture straight, one ankle crossed elegantly over the other, like she belonged in a magazine. Then came the DJ's voice, smooth, rehearsed. "All right, everyone, it's time to hear from someone very special to our bride." I froze mid-step. For a flicker of a second, something lifted in me, hope maybe, or just confusion. I adjusted the side of my dress and stood taller, not walking forward but bracing, like a door might finally crack open. "Let's welcome Cousin Lance!" Applause scattered across the room like polite popcorn. A few guests clapped a beat too long. Lance, who to my knowledge hadn't spoken to Trista since 2019, shuffled up to the mic, visibly sweating under the lights. I stayed exactly where I was, still. He cleared his throat and started with a joke about meeting Trista at a family reunion. One that had to be a lie, because Trista skipped that reunion entirely. The crowd chuckled anyway. I stood there thinking, anyone. They would have handed the mic to anyone, just not to me. Not the sister who lived in the same city. Not the one who helped Mom through her hip surgery. Not the one who once drove 4 hours in a rainstorm to bring Trista an overnight bag when her flight got canceled. But Lance? Sure, let him speak. The speech ended. Another round of applause. People returned to their seats. I didn't. I made my way to the champagne station, picked up a glass just for the motion of it, then headed toward where Marjorie sat, dabbing the corners of her eyes like something about that moment had moved her. I stood beside her quietly, waiting until she looked up. She didn't. So I spoke. Did you know they were going to have Lance speak? She blinked, looked at me like I'd interrupted a sacred meditation. Well, yes, she said gently. Trista thought it might be more upbeat that way. You're more introspective, honey. This kind of thing, crowds, speeches, it's never really been your strong suit, right? I stared at her, my voice caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. You didn't even ask me. She sipped her champagne. Sweetheart, I didn't think you'd want the pressure. There it was again, the reframing. My silence wasn't their choice, it was my nature. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because there was nothing else to say to someone who's rewritten the story so thoroughly that she thinks it's true. I drifted away, weaving past a table of groomsmen trying too hard to impress each other, past 2 teenage girls snapping selfies against the flower wall. The evening air had cooled now, enough that stepping outside didn't feel like escape. It felt like clarity. Out on the balcony, the sky had faded into pale lavender. The ocean beyond the bluff shimmered in the dying light. I pulled my phone from my clutch and opened my notes app. I started typing without fully knowing where the thought would land. If they're this afraid of what I might say, maybe it's time I said it. I stared at the line, reading it twice, then 3 more times. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't send it anywhere. I just saved it. Behind me, the music swelled again. A slow song this time. One of those generic ballads meant to cue emotion without specifics. I leaned on the balcony rail and let the salt air sting my eyes just a little. Not from tears, though it would have been understandable. No, this wasn't sadness anymore. It was the moment after. They'd done everything they could to mute me, but silence doesn't mean surrender. The lights above the terrace glowed like tiny paper moons, strung between wooden beams softened by ivy. I sat alone on one of the benches, the distant murmur of laughter and jazz drifting from the main hall like it belonged to a different world. I hadn't meant to hide. I just needed somewhere my name wasn't a joke and my silence wasn't assigned. The sea air had shifted cooler. I hugged my arms, letting the moment stretch a little longer than it needed to. Out of habit more than purpose, I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. Most were old group threads, notifications I hadn't bothered to clear. Scrolling through them felt like flipping through a yearbook of moments no one remembered I was part of. That's when I saw it. A voice note from Trista, dated 6 months ago. I hadn't opened it when it came. It must have arrived during one of those weekends when I'd convinced myself distance was healthier than engagement. I pressed play. Her voice crackled through the phone, light and casual, like she didn't know she was being recorded. I'm not marrying Darian because I'm in love with him, obviously. I just know how to manage him. He's so easy. Honestly, I could train him blindfolded. There was laughter, not hers, someone else's, maybe a friend. Then a click as the message cut off. I didn't react at first, just stared at the phone like it had betrayed me too. I remembered brushing it off the first time, assuming it had been sent by mistake, meant for someone else. Or maybe I just didn't want to hold one more truth that proved what I'd always suspected. Trista wasn't just cruel to me, she was calculating with everyone. It wasn't just me she pretended around. Footsteps behind me made me turn. Darian. He was alone, phone in hand, clearly stepping out to take a breath. His face was unreadable, not the smooth, polished charm he usually wore, but something quieter. He noticed me, paused, and gave a small smile. Didn't expect to see anyone else out here, he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. You hiding too? I managed a half smile. Something like that. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the darkened lawn. She's different tonight. I didn't answer. Darian exhaled. You think she's changed? I turned to him. You really want to know what I think? His silence was answer enough. I tapped the screen, scrolled to the message, and pressed play. No commentary, no explanation, just Trista's voice, raw and real and cruel. He didn't interrupt. His expression didn't shift much, except for a tiny twitch at the corner of his jaw. When it ended, he looked at me. She said that about me? She didn't know I heard it, I said calmly. Until now, no one had. He let out a dry laugh, one with no humor at all. And she sent that to you? By accident, I said, and I let it slide, because I didn't want to be involved. But you asked. He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet people only manage when they're weighing more than just feelings. They're weighing futures. Finally, he said, You know, I always wondered if I was just another accessory in her story. I thought maybe that was just my own insecurity. I didn't speak. I knew too well what it was like to question your own instincts until someone else confirmed them. She's charming, he said. Smart, strategic. But I never thought manipulative. I looked at him. You deserve to know who you're marrying. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the shadows stretching across the yard. Then he said almost to himself, I need to talk to my mom. It wasn't dramatic. There was no explosion. Just a man adjusting the lens he'd been using to look at his life. He didn't thank me. He didn't owe me that. But he heard me. And for the first time that day, that was enough. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't fought. But I'd been heard. By the time we left the terrace, the air had shifted. Cooler, heavier. The kind of weight that didn't come from weather, but from knowing something irreversible was about to unfold. We didn't talk much on the way to the conference room. Darian was quiet, focused, like someone mentally sorting a drawer they'd avoided for too long. I followed a step behind, no longer trying to blend in or disappear. That part of me had been peeled away. The conference room was tucked behind a hallway near the catering entrance. It wasn't glamorous, no chandeliers or rose walls, just a neutral space meant for logistics and last-minute vendor meetings. But in that moment, it felt like neutral ground, a place where truth didn't need a spotlight to exist. Darian opened the door, let me in first. The room was dim, lit only by overhead cans and the glow from a wall sconce in the corner. A long table sat at the center, perfectly staged with notepads and branded pens. Corporate civility at its finest. She's texting her stylist again, Darian said, voice low. Same person from the last few fittings. She's panicking now. I saw her screen when she left it open for a second. I nodded, just once. She knows something shifted. She knows I did. Before I could reply, the door opened again. Althea stepped in like she'd been summoned to a boardroom she'd once owned. Her gown was sleek, navy with a slight shimmer. Her hair pulled back in a twist so tight it didn't move when she did. In her left hand was a navy envelope, thick, crisp, decisive. She sat at the end of the table, not waiting for us to rise. We're skipping the niceties, she said. Let's get to it. Darian didn't sit. He hovered near her, still holding onto the edge of composure. I stayed to the side, more witness than participant, but not invisible. Not this time. Althea slid the envelope open and laid out 2 printed pages on the table. This came in by accident, she explained, her voice precise. My assistant rescheduled a styling appointment last week. Trista's stylist sent me their full backup by mistake. Apparently, they upload all client communications to a shared cloud folder. And your sister? She doesn't believe in deleting things. She tapped the paper once. I leaned forward. Darian took the sheets in both hands and read them slowly, eyes scanning every line as if each one chipped away at whatever illusion still stood. 6 months in, I'll have everything. The house, the account access, he won't even notice. Just need to play sweet until he puts my name on the deed. After that, it's mine. He exhaled through his nose, then flipped to the next page. She's easy to predict. His mom, too. If I say thank you and compliment her hair, she folds like paper. I'll have both of them wrapped by the time this wedding's over." No one spoke for several long seconds. Althea broke the silence. "She planned this like a business deal." Darian didn't look up. "I should have seen it." "No," I said softly. "You were meant not to." He looked over at me then, and I saw something flicker. Rage, hurt, disbelief, but also something steadier. Resolve. "I want this to end," he said. "Not tomorrow, tonight." Althea gave a sharp nod. "We'll keep it controlled, legal, strategic." I took a breath. "And honest, if we're doing this, there's no more acting." Althea turned to Darian. "You still want to do this here?" He nodded. "It ends here." We sat there in silence for a beat. It wasn't awkward. It was the sound of all three of us choosing clarity over comfort. Althea slid a card from her purse. "My attorney's already here as a guest. I'll have him draft the paperwork." Darian ran a hand through his hair, then looked up. "Let's make this clean." I leaned back, watching both of them, mother and son, suddenly united not by celebration, but by the need to reclaim control over their own lives. Outside the room, I could hear the muffled sounds of music rising again. Toasts being made, glasses clinking, the perfect illusion of a happy night rolling forward. But in here, the truth had taken root, and the wedding would go on, but not the way Trista planned it. The murmurs of the crowd drifted back like waves easing into the shore after a storm. We re-entered the main hall through a discreet service corridor, Althea leading with unmistakable poise, Darian beside her, silent but certain, and me just behind, heart steady for the first time that night. Our footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor, half muted by the music that wrapped around the room like fog. It was just after 8 o'clock. Candles flickered across satin-covered tables, and laughter curled through the air like smoke, rich with wine and false comfort. Guests leaned in close over dessert plates, sleeves rolled up slightly, as if the evening had settled into something relaxed and familiar. They believed naively that the most uncomfortable moments had passed. Trista stood at the front of the room beneath a soft wash of light, her face sculpted into a flawless smile, practiced, polished, campaign-ready. Her hand rested lightly on Darian's arm, not as a partner might hold, but like someone staking a claim. But Althea didn't walk toward the center table, the one adorned with roses and applause. She walked to the microphone. There was no announcement, no spotlight shift. Just her heels clicking against stone and a quiet ripple of attention that spread like chilled water across a too-warm room. Heads turned, casual conversations faded. The room tilted ever so slightly. Trista's smile held for precisely 3 seconds. Then she saw what Althea carried. Not a crystal flute, not a toast card. It was paper, stapled, creased, purposeful. Althea's voice rang out, low but clear, with the tone of someone who didn't need volume to be heard. "Before the next toast," she said, "I'd like to share something. Just a short passage from a message I was forwarded recently." Trista's fingers flexed at her sides. Her mask was still on, but cracked. A pause stretched, long enough for the room to hold its collective breath. Althea read, "6 months in, I'll have everything. The house, the accounts. He won't even see it coming. I just have to play sweet until the deed's in my name." No gasp, not yet, just silence. A slow, creeping silence that spread from table to table like ink in water. Trista stiffened. "That's taken completely out of context," she barked too fast. "You don't even understand what that was about." She laughed, a high, strained sound meant to sound casual. It didn't. I stepped forward without thinking, standing beside Althea. Not rehearsed, just right. "You told your friend Darian was a placeholder," I said, my voice steady. "A man with benefits until the paperwork was done." This time people turned. You could feel it, the collective mood shifting on its axis. Trista let out a brittle chuckle, eyes darting. "Oh, please. She's always been jealous of me. You've all seen it. This is just another sad attempt to hijack something that was never about her." She was unraveling, and fast. But it wasn't my words that broke her. It was Darian. He stepped away from her, silently, no outburst, no dramatic monologue. Just a man holding an engagement ring between his thumb and forefinger like something tainted. He stared at it for a breath, then walked to the table and placed it gently next to the folded napkins. Then he turned and walked away. Stillness followed. Not awkward, not tense, just Real. Trista stumbled toward Marjorie like a child caught lying. Mom, say something, please. Marjorie clutched her purse tight, her knuckles white, her eyes uncertain. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Not for Trista, not for me. Randall shifted beside her, eyes fixed on the floor like the pattern of the carpet held secrets more comforting than what unfolded in front of him. Trista turned again, scanning the room for support. This is a setup. You think this is real? I did everything right. I planned every moment, every flower, every song. I gave this night everything. And that's the problem, Althea cut in, voice cold steel wrapped in silk. You built a spectacle, not a relationship. Trista's voice cracked. You're destroying my life. I looked at her, not with anger, just a truth long overdue. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. We just stopped pretending not to see it. For a second, she stood frozen, lipstick smeared, mascara clinging to the corners of her lashes. The version of her she worked so hard to sculpt now distorted under the light of consequence. Then she screamed, not in pain, not in fear, the kind of scream people hear in dreams where everything falls apart and no one catches you. It ripped through the room, raw and unfiltered, a sound that echoed long after it stopped. But no one rushed to her side. The guests didn't flee. They didn't whisper. They watched. And so did I, as everything she built, brick by brick, collapsed under the truth she thought would stay buried. The air had changed, not the kind of change that follows a new song or a dropped glass, but something deeper, visceral. It slipped beneath skin and into bones, sending a low-level hum of awareness through every body in the room. Something had snapped, and even if people weren't ready to say it out loud, they felt it. You could see it in the way conversations halted mid-sentence, in how every pair of eyes slowly shifted toward the center of the room, like the spotlight knew exactly where to land. Trista stood there, alone beneath the soft golden glow that now felt more like interrogation than celebration. Her chest heaved. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for a lifeline. The smile she'd worn all evening, glossy and curated, had vanished, and what remained was something unrecognizable, panic layered over pride, fury masking humiliation. This was supposed to be my moment, she yelled, voice cracking like glass under pressure. My engagement, my future! Her words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and desperate, falling into a silence thick with discomfort. Then she spun on Darian, rage and disbelief flashing across her face. And you? How dare you let this happen? In front of everyone? But Darian didn't meet her with matching fire. He didn't shout, didn't even flinch. His hand calmly dipped into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, and he pulled out a white envelope. Clean, uncreased, ready. Without saying a word, he walked to the nearest table, one still glittering with uneaten desserts and half-empty flutes of rosé, and placed the envelope next to the champagne tower. I already signed it, he said. There it was. Just 4 words, spoken plainly but carrying the weight of finality. The room didn't gasp right away. It took a second, like people needed a moment to process what they'd just heard. Then a gasp. A clink of glass. Somewhere a child began to cry, not because they understood, but because every adult in the room had suddenly gone quiet, and that kind of silence is terrifying in any language. Althea stepped beside Darian, resting a hand gently on his arm like the punctuation at the end of a sentence already spoken. We're leaving, she said. Then, as if remembering something mildly inconvenient, she turned toward Trista and added, You'll hear from our attorney in the morning. And just like that, they walked away, not hurriedly, not dramatically, with poise, with intent, with dignity. Behind them, chaos tried to find a foothold. Trista stood frozen. Then her hand flew up to her hair, smoothing strands as if reclaiming her reflection could somehow piece the night back together. Her gaze snapped to the crowd, eyes wide, pleading. Mom! She cried out, reaching into the air like a child drowning in a pool of strangers. Tell them I'm not the bad guy here. You always protected me. You always said I deserved the best. Marjorie didn't move. She stood clutching her champagne glass like it was an anchor. Her expression was hollow, confused perhaps, but also something closer to resignation, like a mirror that finally stopped pretending to be a window. Trista's voice broke again. "Mom, please, say something." The entire room waited. Then Marjorie spoke, softly, so soft it might have been mistaken for a sigh if not for the words that carried with it years of avoidance. "I protected what looked good on paper," she said. "I didn't protect what mattered." No explosion, no argument. Just the sharp sting of a truth no one had dared name until now. I stepped forward. Not because I needed to, not to gloat, just because it was time. Each heel tapped against the marble like punctuation. The crowd split in front of me, not with fear, but understanding. Some of them looked away, others stared, but none spoke. Trista faced me like a wounded animal, teeth bared behind trembling lips. "Are you proud of yourself?" she sneered. "Was this your plan? To ruin me? To take everything?" I didn't answer her. I turned to Marjorie. "You watched her silence me again and again," I said. My voice was level, controlled. "And you said nothing." Marjorie blinked back tears. Her shoulders sagged like the weight of decades had finally decided to settle where they belonged. "I didn't know how to stop her," she said. I shook my head. "No, you just didn't want to mess up the picture." That's when Trista lost it. "This is disgusting," she spat. "You're just bitter, that's all. Bitter because nobody wanted to hear your sad little story." I met her eyes one last time. "No, Trista, I'm not bitter. I'm just not invisible anymore." And I turned away. Not in triumph, not in rage, but in something else entirely, clarity. I walked past the display of framed family photos, the ones that never included me, the ones that always told half a truth with full conviction. I didn't stop to stare this time, because I didn't need to see my face in their version of the story. I had finally found my voice, and it didn't need to be framed to be heard. The crowd didn't erupt. They didn't applaud. They didn't even shift in their chairs. They simply watched, silent witnesses to a moment that didn't require spectacle, just truth. At the door, I paused, not out of hesitation, just a final glance. Marjorie stood with her hand over her mouth. Trista had sunk into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks, surrounded by no one. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their guilt. I just needed to leave, whole. A week later, I woke up to quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't scream of abandonment or emptiness, but of space. Space I had claimed, finally, for myself. The blinds in my San Diego apartment swayed gently with the morning breeze. Outside, the bay shimmered in the early light, a watercolor of pale gold and sea foam. The coffee maker gurgled behind me, filling the kitchen with its slow, familiar rhythm. No notifications blinked on my screen. No calendar reminders. No wedding talk. And no apologies waiting to be accepted. I wrapped my hands around the mug and leaned against the counter. My phone buzzed softly. 7th call this week. Marjorie. I let it go to voicemail. Some silences are empty, but this one, it was full. Full of choice. Full of peace. A new message popped up moments later, the preview line enough to sting and soothe all at once. "I know I was wrong. I'm trying to make it right. Dinner? Just you and me." I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. Instead, I placed the phone face down and said aloud, quiet, just for me, "I needed you then. Now I need me." Later that morning, I walked the Marina Trail, one hand tucked in the pocket of my jacket, the other holding a paper bag with 2 croissants. I met Mona at our usual bench, the one with the view of sailboats and dog walkers, and the pier where we once danced on New Year's Eve with plastic flutes of sparkling apple cider. "Morning," she grinned. "You look taller." I laughed. "New shoes, new spine." We talked for a while. About nothing big. About how her upstairs neighbor started jazz guitar at 11 p.m., about a librarian Mona thinks might have a crush on her, about how I still haven't finished that novel I said I'd write 3 years ago. And then I pulled out a photo from my coat pocket. It was old, creased at the corners, color faded to soft browns and greens. One of the few from my childhood that had survived countless moves. Trista in the middle, smiling with all her teeth. Marjorie holding a glass of wine. My father blurry in the background. And me, half cut from the edge. Not because I wasn't there, but because no one made sure I was centered. Mona glanced at it, then at me. You keeping it? I nodded. But not on the fridge. I folded it once, neatly, and slid it into a small silver tin. The kind meant for keepsakes, not grudges. Then I closed the lid. I'm not erasing the past, I said. I'm just not letting it tell me who I am anymore. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That evening, as the sun lowered itself into the Pacific like a coin dropping into a wishing well, I sat at my desk and booked a flight. One way to Maine. Coastal, quiet, unclaimed. Something I had always wanted, but never given myself permission to do. Until now. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Mona. Just circled the date on a paper calendar I bought last week from a bookstore that smelled like pine and second chances. Back in the mirror, my reflection caught me off guard. Not because I looked different, but because I didn't. Same face, same jawline, same uneven brows. But this time the woman looking back didn't ask if she belonged. She didn't beg to be seen. She was enough. They built a table I didn't belong at, so I built my own. And maybe that's the kind of freedom we don't need permission for. Some things in life don't end with a slam or a scream. Sometimes they end with a quiet walk out of the room and the decision to never walk back in. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one who always made space for others but never claimed your own, maybe this story feels a little like yours. I used to think being left out meant I had to try harder to fit in. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't fighting for a seat. It's building your own table. And if you're standing at the edge of something painful right now, wondering if your silence is strength or surrender, ask yourself this. What would change if you started choosing yourself too? Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked away from a situation that didn't honor who you were? Or maybe you're still sitting at that hallway table wondering if you deserve more. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story hit closest to home for you? Drop a 1 if this story spoke to your heart. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every city, every name. And if it didn't quite hit the mark, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me what stories you want to hear next. If this video moved you, even just a little, please consider subscribing to this channel. That one click helps me keep telling stories that matter. Stories about us, about healing, about truth. I'm Laureen, and I want to thank you for listening. Because finally, I know my voice is not just mine anymore. It's one of many, growing louder, stronger, together. Hi there, I'm Lacey. It started with a phone call, my parents telling me I had to pay back my brother's $590,000 loan. They said it was my duty. I smiled, but inside, I broke. Turns out the signature on the loan wasn't just fake, it was mine forged, by my own family. And that dinner where I finally confronted them? My mom looked me in the eye and said, "Family helps each other," but I was never the one being helped. The phone rang just as I placed my keys on the counter. I had barely taken off my coat. Midweek silence filled the apartment, no TV, no music, just the soft hum of the fridge. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, area code from somewhere in state. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something gut instinct maybe made me swipe to answer. "Is this Lacey Monroe?" "Yes," I replied cautious. "This is Shelby from Liberty National Bank. We're reaching out regarding the mortgage under your name. It's in serious default. The outstanding balance is $590,000. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. My pulse slammed in my ears. "There must be some mistake," I finally managed. "I don't own a home. I rent. I've never applied for a mortgage in my life. I understand, but the loan originated 3 years ago. All documents are under your name. We've sent multiple notices. This is our final attempt before further legal action." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. After hanging up, I sat down slowly, trying to remember if I'd ever co-signed anything. The only possibility, buried in the back of my mind, was a conversation with my younger brother Dorian years ago. "I just need someone to stand in for a bit, you know. Paperwork stuff. Doesn't mean anything." I'd brushed it off then. He always had a way of saying things that felt harmless, urgent, but vague. And our mother had backed him up, saying, "He's got big dreams, Lacey. Don't crush them. I didn't agree to anything. Not officially. At least I didn't think I had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept scrolling through emails, old messages, legal junk ID long forgotten. Dorian had a history of making impulsive financial moves. But this was something else entirely. Fraud, maybe, or worse. I pulled out my file box, the one I only touched during tax season. I found nothing unusual at first, but in an envelope marked Employment Docs, buried under an old pay stub, I saw it. A printed mortgage application, my name, my social security number, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not quite. My signature has a slight hook at the tail of the Y in Lacey. This one didn't. The slant was too perfect, too smooth, like someone had practiced, copied, faked. I dropped the paper on the floor. My hands trembled. That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And whoever made it, did it with full knowledge of what they were doing. I thought of Dorian's charm, how he could lie without blinking, and how many times our mother had covered for him. How many times I'd been told to let it go, or be the bigger person. But this wasn't spilled milk or missed rent. This was my life, my future. That wasn't my signature. And suddenly everything got a lot darker. I stared at the document like it had bitten me. There was no denying it anymore. The signature looked like mine hell. It was almost beautiful in its imitation, but I could see what they couldn't. The tail of the M was too smooth. The angle of the letters too uniform. I knew my own handwriting, especially on legal forms I never signed. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms hard against my temples. My mind was already racing to the only possible explanation. This wasn't a clerical error. Someone had planned this deliberately. Calculated, rehearsed. And only one name came up in my head. Dorian. 3 years ago, he asked for help co-signing something just on paper, he'd said. You're the one with the credit. Come on, Lacey, it's just temporary. I hadn't even responded, and I certainly never signed anything. But here it was, ink that wasn't mine, attached to a loan I didn't know existed. My name, my identity, used like it belonged to someone else. My trust, sold off behind my back. I didn't cry, not this time. I sat quietly with the screen still glowing beside me and made a decision. Sunday came too fast. The table was set like it always was. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, Arlene's too sweet lemonade. Dorian was already there, grinning, acting like nothing had happened. Cliff sat in his usual seat, silent as ever. My mother floated from kitchen to dining room like a 1950s sitcom, wife smiling, humming. No one noticed how stiffly I moved when I took my place. No one asked why I hadn't said a word since I arrived. We made it through dinner, barely. Dorian droned on about car troubles. Arlene laughed too hard at something Cliff muttered. I waited until the last fork scraped the plate. I have a question, I said, voice low, even. 3 sets of eyes turned to me. Anyone know anything about a mortgage under my name? Dead silence. Dorian blinked first. Well, wait, what are you talking about? Arlene's smile faded. Lacey, honey, this isn't the time. Actually, I interrupted, it is. Dorian leaned back. You must have misunderstood. I used your name just for the paperwork. It's not like it's hurting anything. You forged my signature. Arlene reached for my hand across the table. I didn't let her touch me. Sweetheart, it was for family. You're not even making payments. We thought you'd be okay with it. You thought I wouldn't find out. Cliff cleared his throat but didn't speak. Not a word. As always, I scanned their faces. Dorian, defensive. Arlene, playing innocent. Cliff, detached. And all of them, every single one, acting like I was the problem. Thanks for the honesty, I said, my voice steady. But inside, the storm had only just begun. It wasn't just the loan, it was the weight of being invisible my whole life. I sat in the dark, curled on my living room floor, the bank documents spread out like crime scene photos. The silence in my apartment wasn't peaceful. It was thick, suffocating, the kind of silence that lets the truth echo louder. I kept seeing their faces from dinner, Arlene brushing off my anger with a smile, Cliff refusing to meet my eyes, Dorian playing dumb. They'd stolen from me, not just money, but dignity. And yet none of them even flinched. This wasn't new. I thought back to my college graduation. I'd waited alone outside the auditorium, cap in hand, watching other students get pulled into hugs and cameras flashing. My parents never showed. They'd called the next day with a weak apology. Something came up. Dorian's car broke down. Of course it did. Years later, when I got promoted to department lead, I told them during dinner. Arlene barely blinked. "Oh, that's nice, sweetie," she'd said, right before launching into Dorian's latest job loss. I was always the steady one, the one who didn't need help, and because of that, they thought they could use me like a spare key, kept in a drawer until it was convenient. I rubbed my hands down my face and stood. The folder on the table wasn't going to build itself. I pulled open my printer drawer and started gathering the PDF with the forged signature, the overdue letters, my credit score alert. One by one, I slipped them into clear sleeves. Not for drama, not for revenge, for proof. If they had the nerve to lie to my face, I needed to protect mine. After a while, I paused and reached for an old shoebox tucked on the top shelf of my closet. Inside were birthday cards. To our responsible girl, most of them read. Not loved, not admired, just responsible. Like a dependable tool. Like a piece of furniture that never complains. It hit me then. They didn't cherish me. They relied on me, because I never asked for anything in return. All those years I thought I was being loved, I was just being used. I opened my laptop. This time, I wasn't searching for comfort, I was searching for a lawyer. The sun had barely risen. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but I didn't feel tired. I felt clear, focused. The kind of sharp awareness that comes after betrayal has burned through every last excuse. By 9 a.m., I was seated at a coffee shop downtown, a stack of printed documents in my bag, and a name written on a napkin, Harlan Kovac-Creel, estate fraud attorney. A contact passed to me through a colleague who whispered, "He doesn't ask dumb questions. He just fixes problems." He arrived 5 minutes early, gray suit, steady eyes, no small talk. I slid the folder across the table. He opened it, scanned the papers, flipped page after page without blinking. When he finally looked up, his tone was steady. "This isn't messy paperwork. This is identity fraud." I nodded once. "Can we do something about it?" "Oh yes," he said, "and we will." For the first time in days, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. This wasn't about drama. It wasn't about Dorian anymore. This was about men not letting this ruin what I'd built. By late afternoon, I walked into the Spokane Police Department. The walls smelled like over-bleached tile and stale coffee. I stepped up to the counter and asked to file a report. The officer looked through my documents. "So, your brother did this?" he asked, careful but still surprised. "My family? Yes," I said simply. "But that's not the point. This is illegal." He nodded, stamped the papers, and handed me a copy of the report. It felt heavier than it looked, like it held years of silence. I drove home with the report on the passenger seat. I didn't stop for groceries. I didn't call anyone. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, sealed a certified letter to the bank with everything inside, the mortgage, the police report, my statement. I wrote every word carefully, not as a plea, not as an apology, as evidence. I slipped it into the outgoing mail slot downstairs and turned to head back up. My phone buzzed. A message from Arlene. I didn't read the message. Whatever it said, it didn't matter anymore. 3 days later, she showed up at my door as if nothing had happened. Arlene stood in the hallway holding a pie. A damn pie. Like we were in some Hallmark movie where fraud could be patched with cinnamon and fake smiles. "Hi, honey," she said, as if my silence had only been about missed phone calls. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything. I stepped aside, and she walked in without waiting for permission. She placed the pie on my kitchen counter and turned to face me. We never meant for things to get so messy. Messy. That was her word for identity theft. "I mean, you could have kept this in the family, Lacey," she added. "You didn't have to drag outsiders into it." I kept my arms crossed. "As your brother. We just thought he's always struggled." "You thought I'd stay quiet," I cut in. Again. She flinched. "This isn't you. You don't blow things up like this." "No," I said, "but I warned you, and you didn't listen." For a second she looked like she might cry. Then she straightened her back, scooped up the pie, and walked to the door. Before she opened it, she turned and said, "You're tearing this family apart." I tilted my head. "I didn't forge anything. I'm just not cleaning it up this time." She blinked. I could see her mouth moving, trying to come up with another excuse, another guilt trip. But I was done listening. I walked over and closed the door, gently, right in the middle of her sentence. The silence that followed was the loudest sound in my life. Back inside, my knees buckled, but I didn't cry. I sat on the floor, hands gripping my sleeves. I stayed like that until my phone vibrated. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from Arlene, then 5 from Dorian. I deleted them all without listening. I tossed the phone onto the couch, letting my head rest back against the wall. Maybe now, finally, the chaos would settle. But then, my screen lit up again, this time with a call from HR at work. I thought the worst was behind me, but then my job called. We received a concerning email about your character, Lacey. That's how it started. The HR manager's voice on the other end of the call was carefully neutral, the kind of voice people use when they're handling a grenade. I was seated at my desk, coffee cooling beside my keyboard. I didn't move. The message was anonymous, she continued, but it included specific claims that you'd committed fraud, that you're unstable, unfit for leadership. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat. I'd like to see that email, I said, calm but clipped. She hesitated. It was flagged to be confidential. I am being accused of a felony. You can show me the email. An hour later, it sat on my screen. The language, the phrasing, subtle jabs about my history of control issues, about how I used legal threats to silence family. One sentence even called me calculated. It had Dorian written all over it. I printed it out. That night, my apartment turned into a war room. I laid out every document on the kitchen table: dates, messages, screenshots, the police report, even the certified bank letter. I created a timeline from the first mortgage notice to the voicemail from HR. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I drafted an email to the legal team at work, attached the full binder in a zip file, and added one line. Please see the verified legal report attached, disputing the false claims. No long explanation, no defense, just facts. I wasn't asking to be believed. I was showing what couldn't be denied. By 11 p.m., I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Spokane's city lights flickered like a nervous system. I texted Harlan, "It's getting dirty. I need full protection." The reply came within minutes. Then we hit back. Hard. It wasn't about just clearing my name anymore. It was about ending his game for good. At 9 a.m. sharp, I sat across from Harlan in his downtown office, surrounded by manila folders, timelines, and legal pads. He pushed a stack toward me. These are the subpoenas. We're going after everything. Emails, bank authorizations, internal loan approvals. I signed every document without hesitation. This wasn't just paperwork. It was my war paint. By noon, we had filed a civil suit for identity theft and defamation. Harlan's paralegal printed off my credit reports with sharp red mark slate notices, a credit drop I never caused. Each page was another nail in Dorian's coffin. 2 days later, Harlan called me back in. Dorian's filed a response. I knew better than to expect remorse. The packet was thick. Inside, he claimed I had willingly co-signed the mortgage as a gift of support. He even included an email string that looked like I had agreed. I skimmed it twice, my stomach hardening. Then I flipped open my actual inbox. Metadata, timestamps, IP addresses. The difference wasn't just obvious, it was laughable. He forgot I work in compliance, I told Harlan, who raised an eyebrow and smirked. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, drafting my personal statement for court. Not just facts. Truth. I was always the reliable one, the safe one, until my loyalty became his weapon. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and stared at the calendar. Tomorrow was the hearing. No more emails, no more polite calls, no more quiet dinners where I swallowed what they fed me. Tomorrow we take it to court, and this time I won't be quiet. The courtroom smelled like coffee, nerves, and cheap paper, but I had never felt more ready. The judge called the case number. I walked up to the stand with a spine of steel, dressed in navy, my hair pinned back. Harlan handed the judge our folder. Inside were the forged documents, metadata reports, the police complaint, and every email in proper order. My voice didn't shake as I spoke. I didn't authorize that loan. That is not my signature. Across from me, Dorian adjusted his collar. His lawyer tried to steer things toward miscommunication and family misunderstanding, but the judge wasn't having it. "We're not here to mediate family tension," she said, skimming our packet. "We're here to evaluate fraud." Dorian's team introduced the fabricated emails. I asked the judge if I could speak. She nodded. "I have the originals. I can show you the discrepancy in the metadata timestamps, device logs, even geolocation. They don't match." I handed the evidence to the clerk. Silence followed. Dorian wouldn't look at me. His attorney's confidence melted with each fact I delivered. The judge tapped her pen twice and looked straight at him. Enough. What followed was swift. The mortgage is declared fraudulent. Miss Ellis is absolved of liability. Liberty Bank is ordered to issue a formal apology. This court recommends civil damages. Referral for potential criminal proceedings is under review. I didn't move. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Outside the courtroom, Arlene and Cliff stood near the hallway bench. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to spin it. I didn't wait to find out. I walked past her like she wasn't even there. The sun had moved behind the clouds, but I felt lighter. I got into my car, shut the door, and rested my hands on the wheel. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Some endings don't come with applause, just space and silence. 2 weeks after the verdict, they came. I was rinsing dishes when I caught a shadow through the peephole. Arlene, Cliff, and behind them, Dorian. He didn't look at the door. He stared at his shoes like they held answers he'd never find. Arlene knocked, then again softer. "Lacey, sweetheart, we made mistakes. We should have handled this differently." Cliff cleared his throat. "We need your help. We didn't mean for it to go so far." Still, Dorian said nothing. I opened the door, but not all the way. I didn't lean in. I didn't flinch. "You didn't ask for help," I said. "You demanded it, lied for it. And when I said no, you punished me." They didn't argue. That was new. "I hope you get the help you actually need," I added, voice steady. "But it's not going to be from me." Then I closed the door. Softly, deliberately. And I didn't look back. Saturday morning arrived with gentle sun and no emails. I walked through the farmer's market, toad on my shoulder, fingers brushing tomatoes and tulips. I bought a small bouquet yellow tulips, cream roses, without needing to explain to anyone why. The florist asked, "For someone special?" "Yeah," I said. "Me." Back home, I arranged the flowers in the chipped ceramic vase I always meant to replace but never did. I didn't need a new version of myself. I just needed room to breathe. That evening, I sat on my balcony. A cup of tea warmed my hands. The sky blushed orange over Spokane's rooftops. I journaled a single line. "I don't owe them forgiveness. I owe myself peace." I turned on soft music and let it play while the sun dipped lower. There was no closure speech, no dramatic monologue, just air, light, quiet. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the loudest strength there is. Before I close this chapter, let me leave you with something personal. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that silence doesn't make you noble. And loyalty isn't the same as love. Sometimes, the people who say we're family the loudest are the ones who'll use your kindness as currency. I used to believe that setting boundaries made me selfish. But the truth is, boundaries saved me. Speaking up didn't tear my family apart. They did that themselves, long before I ever said a word. I just finally stopped pretending not to see it. To anyone watching this, if you're in a situation where you're constantly made to feel guilty for protecting your peace, please know, you are not wrong for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from pain dressed up as loyalty. Your voice matters, even if it shakes. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been blamed for doing the right thing? Have you ever been told that's just how family is as an excuse to stay quiet? I'd love to know how you see it. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story resonated with you, or tell me what state you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, I'm still grateful you made it this far. Let me know why in the comments and where you're tuning in from. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, stories about strength, truth, and healing, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Hello, I'm Lenora. My family planned a dream vacation, without me. No call, no message, just silence. I wasn't even worth a courtesy lie. But the twist? They unknowingly booked that vacation at my private resort. The same people who erased me from photos, used my name, even my money, now stood at my front desk. Want to know how it got that far? How it broke? And how I rebuilt? You might see pieces of your own story in mine. The email came through at 7:41 a.m., just as the sun was starting to warm the side of my apartment building in Santa Fe. I hadn't taken a sip of my coffee yet. It had already cooled, and my inbox blinked with the subject line in bold. Family Retreat 2025. Let's go. For a second, I just stared at it. My thumb hovered above the mouse pad as if clicking it would trigger something irreversible. I clicked anyway. Everyone was there. I mean everyone. My brothers, their wives, my cousins, my aunts. Even Dad's second cousin Paul, who lives in Maine and still types in all caps. They were all CC'd, but not me, not even BCC'd. I checked the header twice, then a third time. No hidden fields, no technical oversight. Just a list, perfectly curated without me. I kept reading, foolishly hoping I'd missed something. Maybe a follow-up email, maybe a separate thread. But nothing came, and deep down I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It never had been. They didn't forget me. They removed me. At 8:09 I called my mother. I didn't think it through. My body just moved on muscle memory, like a reflex from childhood, skinning your knee and calling out to the person who might clean the wound, even if you know they're the one who pushed you. "Lenora!" she chirped, way too brightly for a woman who hadn't included her own daughter in the family's annual getaway. "What a surprise!" "Hey," I said. "Got a minute?" I could hear the pause in her throat, the fake smile slipping. She knew why I was calling. "Is everything okay?" I saw the email. "Oh," she breathed. Just that. Not even a "what" email. She already knew which one. I waited. She filled the silence like she always did, with pleasantries soaked in condescension. "Sweetheart, we figured you'd be busy again. You always have those projects going, and with your firm taking off, well, we just didn't want to bother you." I wasn't even asked. "Well," she said slowly, "these trips get so chaotic. You know how it is. We didn't want you to feel pressured." I didn't respond. What was the point? This wasn't a conversation, it was a performance. She was just reciting her lines like she had rehearsed them for weeks. "You're always working, Lenora. We just assumed—" "Right," I cut in. "You assumed?" She paused again, then tried softening her tone. "We didn't mean anything by it. You know we love you, baby." "No, you love the version of me that doesn't take up space." I hung up without another word. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't have that luxury anymore, just the dull tap of an end call on glass. The silence in my apartment was louder than her excuses. I poured myself a glass of wine. It was 11:02 in the morning. I didn't care. I only ever drank this early when someone I loved died, or when I had to accept they were never going to be who I needed them to be. I stared out the window while the wine coated my throat like a slow burn. They hadn't forgotten. They had planned around me. I wasn't an afterthought. I was an intentional omission. The phone buzzed again. It was Savina. "Savina. Saw the thread. You okay?" I stared at the screen a moment before answering. "Me. Yeah, I'm just done pretending this doesn't sting." Savina didn't reply right away, which I appreciated. She knew the weight of silence better than most. Knew it wasn't always empty. Sometimes it held more truth than any well-meaning platitude. That afternoon I tried to work. Tried to sketch something for the Anderson estate remodel, but everything I drew came out harsh. Too many sharp corners, too many sterile lines. No warmth, no light. Just glass and steel and silence. Just like home. I closed the sketchbook and walked over to my bookshelf. A dusty shell sat tucked between two trade journals I hadn't opened since 2019. Turquoise, iridescent. My mother bought it for me when I was 8. Said it looked like it held secrets. Something for my little dreamer, she had called me. Back when I was still her dream. Before I became her excuse. Before she started telling people Lenora's always doing her own thing, like independence was a flaw. That night, I curled up on the sofa with a blanket that still smelled faintly of sage from last winter, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened last year's vacation album. Not mine, of course. The one Savina had quietly screen-captured from the family group thread. There they were, posing in front of a resort gate in Scottsdale. Everyone sun-kissed and grinning. One photo caught me mid-laugh, but I wasn't laughing anymore in the version posted online. My body had been cropped. Just a breeze of my hair remained in the frame, like a ghost that had wandered too close to the living. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the light from my laptop washing over the room in a soft, cold glow. The air had shifted, not in temperature, but in pressure. It was like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't cry. Instead, I closed the family album tab and opened an old backup folder on my drive, one I hadn't touched in almost a year, a habit from when I used to document everything, events, designs, trips, just in case someone tried to say I'd imagined it all. And there it was, the original photo, me, center frame, standing beside that ridiculous lemon cake Mom insisted on ordering from the resort bakery. I was laughing, one arm still holding a pitcher of lemonade. Maribel had been to my right, Uncle Jerome on the other. I zoomed in, my face alive, candid, unfiltered, and then I clicked back to the version from the group thread. Gone. My entire face was gone. They hadn't just trimmed the edges or applied a flattering blur, they had surgically cropped me out, like I'd been a stranger who photobombed a stranger's memory. The caption on the post was even worse. Family forever. The irony of that line burned like acid behind my eyes. I blinked fast, not because I was crying, but because my body was resisting the urge to smash something. That photo wasn't just edited, it was curated. A timeline scrubbed of the daughter who'd made the centerpieces, coordinated the outfits, and reminded everyone to arrive by 3 p.m. sharp because the light would be perfect for photos. But sure, family forever. I minimized the window and leaned back, the old office chair creaking beneath me, the kind of noise that filled a room when nothing else did. Somewhere between the thrum of the refrigerator and the faint hum of traffic outside, I found myself thinking about that barbecue. It was 2 summers ago, July, sweltering. My brother Evan had invited the whole family, plus his newest girlfriend, Ashley, Aubrey, something with an A. She had that soft kind of pretty that made people assume she was sweet. She was fixing herself a drink near the cooler when she turned to me with a squint. "Wait," she'd said, blinking like she was doing the math in real time. "Are you, like, adopted or something?" It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even suspicious. It was just honest. Because she'd been dating my brother for 6 months and had never seen me in a single family post. Not a tag. Not a mention. I remember laughing it off that day, telling her I was the elusive sibling, like some cryptid no one ever caught on camera. But it landed different now. Now it felt like the truth. They hadn't just excluded me from the retreat this year. They had been editing me out for years, on social media, in group stories, even in jokes. I was the footnote in my own family. I opened Instagram. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to see it with fresh eyes. Maybe because I hoped I was wrong. Maribel's feed was a curated shrine to family bliss, perfect lighting, matching outfits, hashtags like #blessed, #family vibes, #grateful. And there it was, her post about the Scottsdale trip. Her caption read, "Designed by love, lived by family." The photo showed the vacation home I had poured 4 months into renovating. Custom tile work, open shelving with reclaimed wood, a fireplace I fought the contractor to center properly. No credit, no mention, just staged smiles. The comments started to blur together until one caught my eye. "Your sister's design sense is amazing." I held my breath. Maribel replied, "Thank you, it runs in the family." No tag, no name, just silence. But silence says plenty. I knew then that this wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being erased. And not erased because I'd done something wrong. Erased because I no longer fit the picture they wanted to project. Because I challenged it by existing outside their narrative. By being the one who left. The one who made something of herself that didn't revolve around Friday night potlucks and Sunday brunches with the same old gossip recycled like bad leftovers. I wasn't part of the family brand. I was the flaw in the campaign. I stood up, legs a little stiff from sitting too long, walked over to the kitchen and rinsed out my wine glass. I didn't know what time it was, the kind of hour where you could lie and call it early or admit it was late. The room felt too still. I needed noise. I booted up my old desktop, the one I kept around for backups and receipts, both the emotional kind and the literal ones. That's when I remembered it, The forwarded email from last year. I hadn't thought of it since. It had seemed minor then. A copy of the original booking confirmation for the Scottsdale Resort, sent accidentally to me instead of Maribel. I remember laughing at the time, forwarded by mistake. Mom said so herself. But something about that moment pulled me back now, with a gravity I couldn't ignore. Maybe it hadn't been a mistake. Maybe someone had wanted me to see it. And if so, why? The next morning arrived slowly. I hadn't slept, not really. My body had gone through the motions, lights off, blanket pulled tight, but my mind never powered down. It was still playing that moment back and forth, like a scratched record. The email receipt. What I once dismissed as a clerical slip was now casting a longer, darker shadow. I didn't bother showering. I shuffled barefoot to the kitchen, still in yesterday's sweatshirt, hair pulled up with a pen. My laptop greeted me with a cold glow as I opened the banking portal I rarely looked at unless tax season rolled around. There it was, a charge from an airline I hadn't flown with in years. It had cleared 2 weeks before last year's vacation. Destination, Phoenix Sky Harbor. Date, 3 days before the family trip began. I blinked, refreshed the page, still there. That card, I hadn't used it since I was 28. The just-in-case card my mother insisted I give her when Dad was in and out of hospitals. "We don't know what emergencies will come up," she'd said back then, her voice low, pleading. I never canceled it. Stupidly sentimental, I guess. Turns out the emergency was a beachside mimosa. Scrolling further, my stomach twisted. Group airfare, hotel deposit, spa service prepayment, all in tidy little transactions, cleanly processed under my name, all lining up with the exact itinerary I now knew like the back of my hand, because I had designed the damn resort they stayed in. They used my money. They cut me out of the photos, out of the emails, but not out of the bill, and not once. This had happened before. Quiet little dings on the same account, always right around family events I'd missed. My fingers hovered above the keys, then moved with surgical calm. I downloaded the statements. Every single one from the past 4 years. I printed them, hole-punched them into a black folder I labeled in Sharpie. Receipts, vol. I. Scene change happened around noon. The sunlight in my kitchen had shifted, drawing harsh lines across the table. I made a fresh pot of coffee but didn't drink it, just poured and stared. They always told me I was independent, that I didn't need anyone. What they meant was, I was financially useful and emotionally disposable. I remembered a conversation from years ago. Mom had looked at me across Thanksgiving dinner and said, "You're the strong one, sweetie. You always land on your feet." She said it with pride, like it was a badge. But now it echoed like a curse. Strength to them meant availability, for resources, for guilt, for silence. I whispered out loud, maybe just to hear it from someone, even if that someone was me. Let's talk about value. They used me like a bank account with no overdraft limit, and now they'd cashed out for the last time. I reached across the table and opened a sleek navy folder. Ocean Crest Holdings, my personal LLC. Most of my family thought I still worked as a freelance designer. They had no clue I had purchased the coastal property outright through the holding company. It had been my sanctuary. Quiet, unbranded, luxurious. No social media, no guests unless invited. The idea struck before I finished the thought. I typed a quick email to the resort manager, then called to follow up. My voice was steady, calm. "Hi, this is Lenora Hart. I believe a reservation was recently made under Suite 2. Possibly using my name?" There was a pause, fingers tapping keys on the other end. "Yes, we have a Suite 2 booked under L. Hart. It was reserved 2 days ago. Is there an issue?" I exhaled through my nose. "No issue. Just wanted to confirm the name. Please flag that reservation for owner review. No changes or access until I say so." "Understood." I ended the call and stared at the screen. Suite 2. Booked in my name. The same name they'd conveniently erased from family events, now suddenly useful again. They weren't just staying at a resort. They were staying at mine. The drive to Ocean Crest took just under 6 hours. I left before dawn, windows down, letting the cool coastal air clear what little sleep clung to me. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was charged, focused. The kind of silence that fills you before something important happens, like the final breath before jumping. I didn't bother calling ahead again. The flag was already on the reservation, and I knew the front desk wouldn't connect the dots. No one ever did. That was the point of structuring ownership through Oceancrest Holdings, an anonymous LLC with just enough distance between my name and my assets. Privacy wasn't a luxury anymore. It was armor. When I pulled into the gravel lot just past the main gate, the resort looked exactly how I remembered. Minimal, coastal, effortless, designed to blend with the cliffside instead of competing with it. I'd obsessed over every detail during the remodel 3 years ago. The stone facade, the curved teakwood decking, the solar reflective windows. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I needed one place in the world that reflected who I was when no one else was looking. I walked in through the side staff entrance, still remembered the door code, and took the hallway past the laundry area. The smell of linen, detergent, salt air, familiar, comforting. Then I turned the corner into the lobby like any guest would. "Welcome to Oceancrest," the receptionist smiled brightly from behind the desk. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, new. She'd never seen me before. "Hi," I said calmly, adjusting the collar of my light coat. "I'm here for a scheduled owner's walkthrough." Her expression flickered with confusion. "Oh, 1 second." She clicked a few keys, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Are you Miss Gellhorn?" I blinked. "No, Miss Hart." Another pause, a deeper one this time. Then she scanned the flagged reservation. Her brows lifted slightly, embarrassed. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Let me just print your visitor credentials." "It's all right," I said, voice even. "No rush." Her cheeks flushed. She tried not to look rattled, but I knew that look. The look people gave when they'd assumed wrong. I'd seen it in business meetings, in contractor bids, even once during a high school reunion when someone asked if I was still into sketching. As she handed over the pass, I leaned slightly over the desk and asked, "Has the Gellhorn party checked in yet?" "No, not yet," she replied. "They're scheduled to arrive tomorrow afternoon. We've prepared 3 suites per their request. Is there something we should be aware of?" "No," I said again. "You've already done exactly what I needed." I made my way down the guest corridor, nodding at a staff member pushing a cart of room service dishware. No one flinched, no one whispered, because no one here knew I had anything to do with this place. I entered the private office suite tucked near the back of the main structure. The space hadn't changed much. Polished concrete floors, white oak cabinetry, high windows facing the ocean. I pulled up the guest reservation file and found it within seconds. Suite 2, under M. Gellhorn. Suite 4, under D. Hartwell. That was my cousin's husband. Suite 5, under F. Navarro, my brother's alias when booking golf retreats. They didn't even try to use fake names. They just didn't expect anyone on the other end to care. I clicked the Settings tab and added one instruction. Upon arrival, place each keycard in a sealed envelope. Label only by registered name. No substitutions. Let them open what they booked. Let them use my name and wear it like it was theirs to borrow. The moment they found out I owned the air they were breathing in this place, well, that moment was mine to time. I walked the property before sunset. Every stone, every deck chair, every terrace stair carved into the bluffside was something I'd chosen. They never knew this place existed. Now they'd walk through it thinking they were above it, as they always did. But this time, the story would end differently. Let them arrive. Let them smile. Let them assume. I'd be right here, watching the gate open, one beep away from a lesson they never saw coming. By mid-morning, I was back at Oceancrest, behind the glass walls of my office. The windows were cracked open just enough to let the salt-heavy wind drift in, laced with eucalyptus and something faintly floral. Maybe the jasmine near the lower path had bloomed early this year. The Pacific moved steadily below, waves folding over themselves like careful breaths. The rhythm was calming, familiar, but my mind wasn't following it. I sat with a half-drunk cup of coffee, long gone cold and bitter, watching the blue line of the horizon. My screen glared from the desk beside me, dashboard already pulled up. Emails sat unread. Messages blinked quietly in the corner, but all my attention was fixed on a single tab. Weekend reservations. It was all there, plain as a spreadsheet. 3 bookings stood out, one for Maribel Gellhorn, another for my parents, and the third, laughably, for L. Hart. Whether the typo was intentional or the result of a careless travel agent, I couldn't say. But the irony wasn't lost on me. My name, butchered and booked into my own resort, as if I were some guest of honor at a stranger's event. I zeroed in on Maribel's suite first. Clicked into the details. Suite 1. Of course. The master. The best. The layout loaded, but I didn't need it. I knew the room better than anyone. I designed it to echo the bedroom from our old family cabin outside Bandon. My childhood sanctuary. The place where I first learned to sketch space, to see possibility in floorboards and beams. That bedroom had been torn down years ago, sold with the land in a fit of adult decisions I hadn't been old enough to contest. But I rebuilt it here. Not out of sentimentality, but as a quiet reclamation. Suite 1 had vaulted ceilings, maple beams, soft light in the mornings, and wide west-facing windows that caught every ounce of sunset. It was a room built from memory and intention, a space I carved from the bones of something lost, and now they wanted to sleep in it, like it was still theirs. My fingers didn't tremble. They moved with steady precision. I clicked Edit. Room assignment. Hold for owner. Do not override. I hit save, then typed a short guest note into the system. Please verify identity before distributing keys. No exceptions. No need for fanfare, no tantrums or threats, just quiet control. I leaned back in my chair and let the soft creak of the leather fill the room. The screen blinked gently, cursor pulsing like a second heartbeat. They would come here expecting champagne flutes and smiles, glossy service and deference. They wouldn't question it. They never had to. That was the problem. Let Maribel strut through the lobby in her newest designer resort wear, sunglasses the size of shields, speaking to the staff like they were born to serve her. Let my parents pretend this trip was their return to grace. Let them all think they were walking into a space that had been waiting for them. I opened the Preferences tab. Firm pillows, cotton sheets, chilled Perrier in fridge, the usual. Then I paused. In the box marked Special Requests, I typed, Add handwritten welcome card. And below that, the message came without effort. Dear guest, welcome to Ocean Crest. Ownership is a quiet kind of power. Please enjoy your stay. I saved it and closed the screen. The card would be printed in clean script on our signature stationery, laid carefully on the bedside table by housekeeping. Subtle. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need their guilt, or their confusion, or their excuses. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. This was boundary. Later, I walked the stone path to Suite 1. The air was still, mid-afternoon calm settling over the bluff. Inside, the room was pristine. The bed had been made with sharp corners. The maple headboard gleamed under soft lighting. Throw pillows rested in symmetrical stacks, each angle deliberate. I stood in the doorway and didn't move. The space felt both mine and not mine, like a memory someone had carefully staged for me to revisit. The irony wasn't sharp. It was slow, spreading. They hadn't requested this room because it meant something. They just assumed the best suite was for them, that it always had been, that it always would be. They didn't know who designed the walls they were about to lean against. I crossed the room and stood by the window, looking out. The sea was quiet. The tide had pulled back, leaving streaks of wet sand shining like glass. A breeze stirred the sheer curtains. In my mind, I saw the younger version of me, 9 years old, curled up on a mattress with a sketch pad balanced on my knees, drawing tree houses and secret forts, inventing corners of the world where no one could touch me. Places made from pencil lines and wishful thinking. I hadn't known then that they'd become real. That little girl had built this, not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but out of vision. Out of the stubborn belief that if no one would give me a place to belong, I'd build it with my own hands. Behind me, the room sat in perfect silence, waiting. They didn't know I'd come here. No one had asked. But soon, very soon, they would. By the time the valet texted that a silver Escalade had just pulled into the roundabout, I was already seated in the resort's administrative lounge. The lounge wasn't technically public, it was reserved for senior staff and high-tier partners. But no one questioned me. The room was designed for privacy, shielded by smoked glass and strategically frosted panels, but I had an unobstructed view of the front desk. I hadn't originally planned to watch this unfold in real time. I told myself I was only here to ensure protocol was followed, that guest approval rules were enforced. But that was a lie, or at least not the whole truth. Deep down, I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. A flicker of movement at the entrance caught my eye. There they were. They entered just as I expected them to, confidently, like they owned the place. Maribel came in first, leading the way with her oversized straw tote swinging against her hip like some careless battle standard. Her walk had that exaggerated energy she reserved for places she thought beneath her. Chin up, smile fixed, moving fast so no one had time to question anything. Iris followed close behind, composed as always, except for the telltale adjustment of her sunglasses, a nervous habit. Even though the lobby was dimly lit, she didn't remove them. She just nudged them higher on the bridge of her nose, as if they gave her armor. Their voices carried easily in the open lobby. "We should have asked for early check-in," Maribel said, not bothering to lower her voice. "These coastal resorts always run on island time." The front desk agent, a young woman with polite eyes and a perfectly practiced smile, offered a nod and turned to her computer. "May I have the name on the reservation?" Maribel pivoted slightly, angling toward the desk. "Should be under Iris Gellhorn, or maybe Maribel Gellhorn. We booked a family suite." The agent typed for a few seconds, then hesitated. Her brows drew together subtly. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I don't see a reservation under either of those names." Maribel blinked, then gave a small, incredulous laugh. No, there has to be. It was confirmed. My mom handled it." She jerked her thumb back toward Iris, who stepped up to the counter. "We have a confirmation number," Iris said calmly. "My daughter managed the booking. It would be under Gellhorn. We reserved the full suite." The agent remained professional. "I understand. Unfortunately, only pre-registered guests approved by the owner are allowed to check in, and I'm not seeing your names listed on that approval." That word, owner, hung in the air for a moment too long. Iris's lips parted. "Owner?" The agent gave a small nod. "This resort is privately held. We're a closed property. All guests must be on the pre-cleared list. I'm afraid I can't authorize access without verification." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. You could almost feel it, like the room was recalibrating its temperature, lowering by degrees. Maribel's voice didn't come. Not right away. She just stared at the receptionist, her jaw tight, fingers wrapping around the edge of her tote strap as if grounding herself. That was my cue. I stood. I stepped out from behind the divider, deliberate in my movement. I didn't rush. My heels didn't make a sound on the polished floor. Not because they were silent, but because the space itself had gone quiet. All eyes turned as I approached the desk. I reached into my coat pocket and handed the receptionist my ID. She glanced at it, and her posture straightened immediately. "Miss Gellhorn," she said with sudden formality, "welcome back." The tension in the lobby didn't snap, it just shifted. Iris's expression twisted into confusion. Maribel turned toward me slowly, recognition dawning in pieces. I offered a smile. Small, measured, cool. Not unfriendly, not warm either. Just precise. "I think there's been a little confusion," I said. "Let me help clarify it." I nodded toward the screen. "Please bring up Suite 2. The agent complied instantly, turning the monitor slightly in my direction. A few names populated the screen. "That's the guest list," I said. "It's under my name. These names here," I tapped the screen lightly, "are the only ones authorized. If someone's name isn't on that list, they won't be staying." I turned to Maribel, then to Iris, holding their gazes. "No offense," I added, voice calm, "but next time you might want to check whose name is on the deed before assuming you've got keys to the kingdom." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult. But the message landed cleanly, irrevocably. The resort manager had arrived during the exchange, quietly standing just out of frame. I turned to him without needing to explain much. Please take any unverified guests to the holding lounge until we've completed a full authorization check. He nodded. Of course. Maribel started to speak, then stopped. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but the weight of the moment pinned her in place. Iris, still frozen behind her sunglasses, looked around like she expected someone else to step in, to correct this, to fix it. But there was no one. Just the two of them, and the realization that the rules weren't bending today. A bellhop approached, suitcase in hand, looking between the front desk and me. Where should I take their luggage? I didn't hesitate. Nowhere. Not yet. And then I stepped aside, quietly, gracefully, letting the silence take over, letting it say everything I didn't need to. The doors sealed behind me with a soft hiss, the kind of quiet finality that felt more permanent than it should have. I didn't turn around. There was no need. I already knew what I'd see. Pitying looks, subtle glances, the kind people throw at a person they've already written off. I walked the stone path back to my villa, the ground lighting up with each step, as though the earth itself acknowledged me. A silent kind of recognition. I wish I could say the same for my family. But the Gellhorns never saw me unless I was useful or inconvenient. Tonight, I was both. Inside, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat in the stillness. The silence after conflict has a sharpness to it. It's not peace, it's a clean cut. A sterile operating table where the mind performs its most brutal work, replaying words, rehearsing what should have been said, and sometimes realizing the worst part isn't what was said, but what was meant. My phone buzzed, once, then 3 times more. Savina. Her name was enough to jolt me upright. The first message was one word. Brace. The second, an image, a screenshot, and then another. My stomach tightened. I tapped the photo to expand it. It was a group chat. Core Gellhorns. The name itself was enough. They hadn't even tried to hide it. The chat included Mom, Uncle Arlo, Aunt Nessa, Maribel, all of them. I scrolled. Maribel. She's just being performative. We all know she spirals when she feels left out. Uncle Arlo. Let her have her little show. Girls needed therapy since she was 16. Mom, we've tried to include her. She pulls away and then plays victim. Savina's next message hit harder than the screenshots. Did you know this existed? No, I didn't. But was I surprised? Not really, just hurt and tired. The last screenshot was fresh, minutes old. Maribel. She can't earn affection, so she buys control. It's pathetic. That one stayed on the screen for a while. I didn't respond. I didn't throw my phone or scream or cry. I just stared. Until the screen dimmed and went dark. There were old wounds I thought I'd already stitched closed. But this tore through scar tissue and hit fresh nerve. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and turned on the shower. The water was hot, too hot, but I let it burn. I wanted to feel something that wasn't betrayal. I dressed with care, dark slacks, a sleeveless black top, hair tied back cleanly, simple, sharp, not mourning, not apologizing, ready. They were hosting a welcome dinner at the terrace bar. I hadn't approved it, but I hadn't stopped it either. The staff had orders to accommodate the Gellhorns. I hadn't corrected that. Maybe I should have. I made my way there through the dusk, the kind of light that softens outlines and makes faces seem kinder than they are. A kind of trick, that light. A lie. Their laughter floated on the wind, easy, effortless, unburdened. The kind that always came when I wasn't around. I approached without warning. No announcement, just presence. The laughter faltered, just a bit, but didn't stop. Maribel saw me first. Of course she did. Her smile was already sharpened when she raised her glass. Well, the woman of the hour, she said, voice sugary sweet. We were just toasting to our good fortune. I gave her a polite nod, took the empty chair across from her. I hope everything's to your liking, I said evenly. She dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, performative and poised. Oh, you know us, she said. We're good at adjusting. There it was. The dig was coming. Some people think money can fix absence, she said airily, but loud enough for the others to hear. I met her gaze, steady. And some people mistake silence for surrender. I don't anymore. I stood. No need to stay and watch the aftermath. Let them sit with that. By the time I returned to the villa, Night had fully arrived. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus, clean and sharp, but my mind was tangled. Not angry, not even shocked. Just clear. I opened my laptop, pulled up the images from Savina's messages, printed each one on crisp white paper. Maribel's voice echoed in my head. She buys control. Fine. I stacked the pages, clipped them with a matte black binder clip. On top, I wrote a note. Simple, legible, no flourish. You said I wasn't part of this family, don't worry. I believed you, and I built something better. No threats, no explanations. I walked the short path to Maribel's room, slipped the packet under her door. No knock, no warning. Let her find it when she was alone. Let her read it when the spotlight faded. That was how they communicated. Quiet power moves, unseen strikes. This was mine. When I went to bed, I didn't sleep because it was resolved. I slept because I had answered. On my terms. In their language. And that was a beginning. Morning came cloaked in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums with something unfinished. I dressed simply. Dark slacks, soft blouse, hair pulled back in a loose twist. I didn't need power heels or lipstick armor. The paperwork would speak louder than I ever could. Savina met me at the side entrance of the resort, her briefcase already unlatched, papers fanned neatly in one hand. She wore her courtroom face, stoic, clean, surgical. I nodded once and she mirrored it. No pep talks, no warming up. This wasn't a performance, it was a reckoning. We walked together to the private conference room. The staff had done as instructed, neutral setting, water glasses placed, blinds drawn halfway to temper the sharpness of morning sun. A rectangular table bisected the room, 8 chairs, 5 already occupied. My mother sat at the head of the table, as if daring me to say otherwise. Maribel was next to her, scrolling her phone like this was beneath her time. My uncle Arlo and cousin Brent sat farther down, posturing in their button-downs as if presence equaled authority. I stepped in without hesitation. Savina followed. She closed the folder, set it on the table in front of me, and stood off to the side. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "Thank you for coming," I began, voice steady. "This won't take long." Maribel looked up with her best version of indifference. "We have reservations to adjust. Can we skip whatever this is?" Savina lifted one brow. I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. "This," I said, "is the original deed of ownership for Ocean Crest Holdings, signed, notarized, and filed under my LLC 5 years ago." Maribel smirked. "You've made that clear." I tapped the second document. "But what you ignored was the clause added through the living trust of our grandmother. Clause 6B, revocation of all implied access to any family member defaulting on agreed tax responsibilities." Savina flipped to the page. Highlighted, bold, circled. I turned to Iris. "You stopped contributing to the family holding 3 years ago. Maribel diverted the shared account for personal expenses, also documented here. That breach nullifies any beneficiary status tied to the original agreement." Brent made a sound like a cough but didn't speak. Arlo crossed his arms, bracing for a fight he hadn't prepared for. "I own this resort outright," I said. "Not symbolically, legally. You are not guests here. You are occupants under false pretense. That ends now." My mother blinked, once, then said, "You wouldn't do this to your own blood." I met her gaze. "You already did. I just read the paperwork." Savina stepped forward, formal now. "Per our filing with the county clerk and pending court confirmation, the family members listed here," she held up a second packet, "will receive a notice of vacated access. It's enforceable as of 9 a.m. today." Maribel shot to her feet. "Are you serious?" I didn't flinch. "Deadly. You're punishing us because we left you out of a trip?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting what I built. You just made it easier to draw the line." I took a slow breath and pulled a small stack of sealed envelopes from my leather tote. "1 envelope each," I continued, placing them on the table. "Exit instructions, a personal effects inventory form, and for convenience, a transportation voucher for your departure." Arlo muttered, "Unbelievable." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, what's unbelievable is that it took me this long." Iris's voice trembled. "This isn't how family behaves." I nodded once. "Agreed." Then I turned to the staff member standing near the door. Please begin guest exit support. The assistant moved swiftly, stepping into the hall to notify logistics. From the window, I saw two bellhops standing by with discreet carts. No public show, no shouting, just movement. Maribel's phone buzzed. She stared at it, ignored it. I leaned forward just enough to be clear, not threatening. This wasn't revenge, I said. This was repair. I used to beg for a place in this family. Now, I understand. I was never supposed to fit. I was meant to outgrow it. My mother opened her mouth again, but no words came. Just the click of her earrings as she turned her head away. I walked to the door. Just before I stepped out, I turned back and added, "The locks changed tonight. I hope you find somewhere that wants you for who you are, not who you pretend to be." Not one of them responded, and I didn't wait. I walked out, not angry, not smug, just free. The morning after they left, I walked the path from my villa to the porch overlooking the bluffs. The air had a sweetness to it, carried in by the salt breeze and warmed by late summer sun. It was the first time in days I hadn't dressed for a confrontation. No linen suits, no structured stance. Just a soft sweater, bare feet on old wood. The porch hadn't changed. The same white railing, the same wooden swing that creaked faintly when the wind nudged it. What had changed was me. Or maybe not changed, just clarified. I sat with a cup of Earl Grey, wrapped both hands around it like it might anchor me. From this porch, I used to watch my family gather around brunch tables, laughing too loudly, clinking glasses, performing togetherness like it was a show they knew by heart. I used to wait for someone, anyone, to wave me over. They never did. Now the chairs were empty, the tables stacked, and for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I looked down at the mug in my hands and smiled, softly, without bitterness. This wasn't triumph. This was peace, a different kind of ending than I used to imagine. It had been a week since the meeting in the conference room, a week since I handed over their exit instructions and watched the Gellhorns shuffle out like children who'd just learned the rules weren't theirs to make. They hadn't fought. They hadn't cried. They just looked stunned. Not because of what I did, but because I'd done it at all. Maribel had left the next morning. Iris and Uncle Arlo stayed an extra night, probably hoping I'd come find them, offer a truce or a hug. I didn't. They packed, they left, no knock on my door, no apology, not even a note, and I was okay with that. That morning on the porch, I reached for something I hadn't touched in decades. The old seashell jewelry box that used to sit on my childhood dresser. It had made the journey here with me, tucked in a box labeled "Sentimental" and forgotten at the back of a closet. I found it the night before while reorganizing the guest villa for incoming clients. It still smelled faintly of lavender, still clicked shut in that oddly satisfying way. I opened it. Inside was a folded square of paper, yellowed at the creases. I unfolded it gently. My grandmother's handwriting greeted me, soft, curved script, like something from another time. "You don't have to win the argument, just own the peace." I don't know how I'd never read it before, or maybe I had, and I hadn't been ready to hear it. But that morning, as gulls circled and waves reached for the shore, I got it. This wasn't about vindication, it was about restoration. I placed the note beneath a glass paperweight, shaped like a wave, then set both on the windowsill where the sun would hit them around noon. It wasn't for anyone else to read, just me. A reminder that even if the world refused to recognize your value, that didn't mean you weren't valuable. Later that afternoon, I received word from my assistant that the last of the Gellhorns had vacated the guest registry. Their forwarding information was filed. The keycards returned. They were gone. No legal noise, no online tantrums, just absence. Maribel had posted a vague quote on her social feed. "Some people think silence is classy. It's actually cowardice in pearls." I didn't respond, didn't screenshot, didn't care. That night, as the sun stretched its last light across the ocean, Savina showed up unannounced. She carried a picnic basket. "Still allergic to small talk?" she asked. "Only when it's dishonest." She laughed and set the basket down on the porch table. We sat and unpacked olives, goat cheese, strawberries, and wine. "What now?" she asked me after a while. I tilted my head. I keep building, I said, just not for them anymore. We talked until stars came out. Not about the family, not even about what had happened, just life, her work, a trip we might take together, the idea of opening a second ocean crest. When she left, I stayed a while longer, barefoot against the wood, toes tapping in rhythm with the tide. There was no sadness in me, no anger left to drain, just a strange, unexpected warmth. Because sometimes the most powerful closure isn't a slam or a scream. It's a door closing gently behind you, without need for a lock. And in that stillness, I didn't feel empty, I felt whole. Before we wrap up, let me share this with you. From one human being to another, from someone who's walked through silence and came out standing. If I've learned anything from this experience, it's this. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most will be the ones who misunderstand you the deepest. And that hurts. But healing doesn't come from forcing your way back into places you were never meant to belong. It comes from building your own place, standing your ground, and choosing peace over permission. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need revenge to feel restored. And you don't need their validation to live a life you're proud of. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is who shows up when no one else does, especially when it's you showing up for yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something that was supposed to feel like home, but never did? What does family mean to you? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, comment a 1, so I know it resonated. And hey, if you didn't like the video, I'd love to know why. Was it the story? The ending? Let's talk about it down in the comments. And if this kind of story speaks to you, if you believe in truth, resilience, and second chances, then do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. This is just one chapter in a whole world of stories we're building here together. Thank you for listening, and more importantly, for feeling it with me.